on Y News. Public complaints over late issuance of advisory on water service interruptions in Metro Manila. Senator Panfilo Lacson says the Recto Bank incident was just a test for China to know the Philippines' reaction in case of any occurrence in the West Philippine Sea. The captain of the FB Jumver 1 changes tune after a closed-door meeting with Agriculture Secretary Piñol. The number of Filipinos who consider themselves poor falls to a new record low according to an SWS survey. And the UNTV and the members of the Church of God International held a one-month feeding program in a school in Pampanga. Good evening. Maynilad and Manila Water customers complain about the water concessionaire's late water service interruption advisory. Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Water Works and Sewerage System, or MWSS, plans to investigate the complaints against the two water concessionaires. Joan Nano tells us why.
Many residents in Quezon City were surprised yesterday to find out that there was no water coming out of their faucets as early as 5 p.m. Because of this, they were not able to store water enough for consumption on Tuesday night and early Wednesday morning. Manila Water released their water service interruption advisory on their social media accounts at past 8 last night. Now, affected residents are complaining because of the late announcement of water service interruption schedules.
Hindi man lang sinabi, nag-abiso kung mawawalan o hindi. Kaya nagulat na lang kami nung bandang hapon na wala ng tubig, di man lang kami nakapag-ipon.
Wala silang sinabi na kahit sa barangay namin, mag-ipon dahil may megaphone naman dyan. Wala talaga sinabi na bigla na lang nawala. Buo dito grabe. Hindi ka nakapaghugas ng plato, wala. Magdamag.
Nag-aabisi sila late, kulang sa use advisory.
On the other hand, Maynilad issued their advisory on their Facebook account at around 10 a.m. today, but the water service interruptions began at 11 a.m. In the comments section, a lot of customers expressed their complaints due to the late advisory. The water concessionaires explained they are doing all their efforts to manage the schedule. They appealed to the public to understand the situation, especially that they are considering a lot of factors to manage the limited water reserve in Angat Dam.
Short notice din naman yung nangyari, no? So after the technical working group meeting kahapon and after the press briefing, that was the only time na sinabi na talagang there's going to be a reduction. There was very little time for us to really list all the barangays and come up with a schedule.
As it was announced, the implementation was already being done. So that little bit of time lang to analyze kung ano yung magiging impact sa aming distribution system.
In an advisory released by Manila Water, they have indicated the hours without water supply and the hours when water is available so that customers can store water. On the other hand, Maynilad imposed water service interruptions last night to fill their reservoirs to supply water to their customers this morning. The water concessionaires explain there really are times that the resumption of water supply may be delayed due to low pressure since the water level in Angat Dam is nearing its critical level. The Metropolitan Water Works and Sewerage System, or MWSS, for their part, are planning to investigate the complaints against Maynilad and Manila Water over their alleged failure to comply with the water service interruption schedule. Joanna, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
Malacañang sees no reason for the Philippines to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States of America in relation to the maritime incident in Recto Bank. Rosalie Cos tells us why.
Malacañang sets aside the possibility of a military attack behind the Recto Bank incident in which a Chinese vessel rammed a Filipino fishing boat on June 9, 2019. There is also no reason to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty, or MDT, of the Philippines with the United States of America, the palace says. The treaty, signed in 1951, mentions the obligation of the U.S. to respond and act when there is an external armed attack against the Philippines. Yesterday, Senator Panfilo Lacson said the MDT is an untapped weapon which the Philippines can use in case the tension over the Recto Bank incident escalates. The lawmaker also says the MDT can make China feel the balance in the disputed territories if the U.S. sends its forces to patrol the area. But according to Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles, the MDT should not even be mentioned because no military attack happened.
MDT can only be used if there is a military aggressive armed attack on a public vessel, on troops, on an airship. That's when the MDT takes effect. If it's not a military attack, then I don't think that mechanism is even available. We're not even going to start talking about that.
Presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo said Senator Lacson is jumping into conclusions.
Hindi pa nga natin alam nga yung facts eh. Kung sinalakay tayo, hindi ba sabi ko, then that treaty will be in operation. But we don't know the facts yet.
Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana insists the Reed Bank incident is not an armed attack. The official also points out that we do not have sovereign rights but exclusive economic rights over the Recto Bank.
Anybody can pass there. What are we doing? We're going to, because we lack equipment, we lack vessels. I think the DFAR should be our agency to up to the area to protect our fisheries.
Meanwhile, the inquiry and fact-finding being conducted by various investigating bodies such as the Philippine Coast Guard, Philippine Navy, Agriculture Secretary Emmanuel Piñol, and Energy Secretary Alfonso Cusi as chair of the Mimaropa Cabinet Officers for Regional Development and Security will continue. Secretary Nograles also confirmed that having a joint investigation with China on the incident is one of the options being considered to undertake. However, the government still awaits the response of China to the diplomatic protest filed by the Philippines in relation to the alleged abandonment of Filipino fishermen by the Chinese crew before determining what further action to take. Rosa Licoz, UNTV News and Rescue, Malacañang.
Senator Panfilo Lacson reveals that a source told him the incident in Recto Bank is just a test for China to know the Philippines' reactions in case of any occurrence in the West Philippine Sea. Nel Maribuhok will tell us why.
There is a possibility that the incident in Recto Bank has a connection to the maritime rights issue in the West Philippine Sea. According to Senator Panfilo Lacson, he has information that the incident is just China's way to test the Philippines' position in the region.
Not from a local source na hindi ko na tinanong kung ano yung basis, but ang sinasabi doon is it was a test of how far back we can go. Kasi kung alam nilang urong tayo ng urong, sulong sila ng sulong.
The senator added a source has told him that it's indeed a Chinese militia vessel that rammed the Filipino fishing boat. China claims most of the South China Sea and overlaps with the exclusive economic zone claims of some other Asian countries. China also has interest in the Recto Bank, which is reportedly rich in oil and gas deposits. According to Senator Lacson, the Mutual Defense Treaty may be used even without an armed conflict. This is to prevent China from its bullying in the West Philippine Sea.
I'm not saying that we implement it, no? Pero hintay pa ba natin magkaroon ng armed attack? Lalong escalation yon. Mas maganda na yung ginamit natin yung treaty to act proactively.
Senator Lacson also criticized the presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo for his apparent siding with China on the Recto Bank incident.
Yung mga cabinet secretaries, lalo yung spokesperson, is not helping any dahil lalo nagkakagulo-gulo dahil yun nga yung huling statement na nakakita agad siya ng butas doon sa pahayag ng mga fishermen. Parang ang mindset niya, Defense Council, na nag-enter ng appearance for China.
Panelo is in defense and says that Senator Lacson is talking nonsense and President Duterte is not siding with China, and this is far from truth. Also, according to the Secretary, the President is thinking and cautious about the issue. He adds he is just echoing the line of the President to wait for the result of the investigation of both countries on the incident. Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, Pasay City.
The opposition calls on President Rodrigo Duterte to stand up for the rights of Filipino fishermen amid the Recto Bank ramming incident. Meanwhile, Justice Antonio Carpio calls on Filipinos to continue defending our territories. Mai Bermudez will tell us why.
Her police escorts blocked her from being heard, but that did not prevent Senator Laila de Lima from airing her take on President Rodrigo Duterte's comment that the Chinese vessel and Filipino fishing boats collision in Recto Bank is just a maritime incident.
Pagdating sa China, consistent siya, naduduwag siya.
De Lima attended her disobedience to summons trial at the Quezon City Metropolitan Trial Court today. On the other hand, Senator Risa Hontiveros says in a tweet that the president's stance only reveals a lot about who he truly is. She calls the chief executive violent and cruel to the poor, foul-mouthed and obscene to women, democracy and advocates, but has a weak character when it comes to issues that involve China. Meanwhile, former Solicitor General Florin Hilbay took a swipe at those who were saying the issue is being used for politicking, and said that defending the national territory and Filipino fishermen and holding the president accountable are real political issues. Bayan Muna asks President Duterte, are the lives of the Filipino fishers of small value as he and his cabinet downplay the issue? The group urges Duterte to dismiss his pro-China policies as the Philippines cannot give up its sovereignty just by dealing with China's onerous loan offers. Bayan Muna challenges the armed forces of the Philippines and its officials to condemn what the group calls surrender of sovereignty to China. For his part, Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio has this call to Filipinos.
EU defending the West Philippine Sea because that's our duty. My generation laid the foundation by winning that arbitral ruling that the West Philippine Sea belongs to the Philippines, and the next generation, including your generation, must build on this foundation so that our exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea will belong truly to the Filipinos, and all the resources there, the fish, oil, gas, and mineral resources, will be enjoyed exclusively by Filipino citizens, including Reed Bank, because that's part of our EEZ.
Mai Bermudez, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
The captain of FB Jumver 1, allegedly rammed by a Chinese vessel on June 9, seems to have changed his statement on the incident. Janice Anyente explains why.
Agriculture Secretary Manny Piñol went to San Jose Occidental, Mindoro to meet with the 22 fishermen on board the Filipino fishing boat hit by a Chinese vessel in Recto Bank last Sunday. After the closed-door meeting, the fishermen seems to have changed their statements of what occurred the night of June 9. According to Secretary Piñol, what happened was an accident.
Ang pinaka-reliable na witness dito, si Richard Blasak, because he was the only person who was awake at the time of the incident. Prior to impact, siya lang yung gising.
Siguro po aksidente o kasi yun na pa sabi siguro kasama ko sinadya gawa ng nung nadisgrasya na kami, nalubog na kami, nag-ano pa yung barko, bumalik ng naglubugan namin, inilawan, tapos pagka nakita kaming lubog na kami, miniglang pinatay lahat ng ilaw nila at tumakbo na sila.
The captain of the Filipino boat, Janelle Insigne, meanwhile, could not directly say they were intentionally hit by the foreign sea vessel. Insigne also apologized to President Rodrigo Duterte for thinking he had been invited for a talk with the president.
Humihingi po ako ng paumanin sa ating mahal na presidente na hindi po pala ako pinatawag niya, kundi po si Secretary Piñol po ang nagpatawag sa amin.
There was never any invitation for them from Malacañang. It was I, the Secretary of Agriculture, who wanted to talk to them, and they came.
Meanwhile, the fishermen appealed to the government to have the captain of the Chinese crew who abandoned them after their fishing boat sank be held accountable. The Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources gave 11 30-foot fishing boats made of fiberglass worth 900,000 pesos as assistance to the fishermen, while the family of each of the fishermen received 1 sack of rice and 10,000 pesos. Secretary Piñol reiterates the result of the maritime inquiry of both the Chinese and Philippine governments will shed light to what really happened in Recto Bank between the two sea vessels. Janice Inhente, UNTV, News and Rescue, Philippines.
UNTV and its primary partner in public service, members of the Church of God International, have chosen a school in Angeles City, Pampanga for a 1-month feeding program. Vincent Arboleda tells us why.
Mariana and Jerwin Garcia walk for about an hour every day to attend classes in Kawayan Elementary School, Angeles City, Pampanga. The siblings dream of finishing their studies to someday alleviate their family's poverty. The Garcias belong to the Eta community on DS Mountain in Porac, Pampanga. But because their place was declared as dangerous to live in after the magnitude 6.1 earthquake last April, their family are temporarily staying at a relocation site in Sitio Pidpid, Porac, Pampanga. Selling vegetables and sweet potatoes has become their bread and butter. Still, this is not enough to make ends meet.
Minsan po, isang araw lang po kami kumain. Kasi sa isang araw, hindi naman po. Minsan po, hindi. Kasi po, walang budget po.
Because of the situation of Mariana and Jerwin's family and other families with the same undertakings, UNTV, led by Mr. Public Service Kuya Daniel Rezon and members Church of God International or MCGI, led by Brother Eli Soriano, have decided to conduct a feeding program in Mariana and Jerwin School.
At ito'y ginagawa po natin sa lahat ng lugar na kung saan tayo pwedeng magpakain sa mga bata sa buong Pilipinas.
The month-long feeding program in Kawayan Elementary School will benefit some 232 school children. The pupils whose weights are below the ideal weight for their ages have been chosen as beneficiaries of the project.
Lubos ng aming pasasalamat at napili yung eskwelahan namin. Kasi kailangan talaga yan. Actually, ang division, ang DepEd ay may feeding program. Kaso hindi pa yan nag-i-start. So, kumbaga, kung mag-i-start yan, yung sinimulan ninyo, itutuloy namin. So, magiging continuous yung pagpapakain sa mga bata.
Siyempre po, unang-una, nais ko po nang magpasalamat sa dakila nating Panginoon. Isa pong biyaya ito ang dumating sa amin, sa aming lugar. Nais ko na rin po pasalamatan ng pamunuan po ng Church of God International sa pangunguna po ni Brother Eli at ni Brother Rason. At sa mga bumubuo po nito ngayon ay kasalukuyan nag-voluntaryo po, magpagod para lamang po mapakain itong mga bata na sa tingin po natin ay kulang ang kanilang o kasama po sila dun sa mga tinatawag natin na kulang sa pagkain o sa malnourished.
Mariana and Jerwin are happy to come to school to study and eat with their fellow students under the feeding program.
Salamat po na inuto sila ng Diyos. Nabigyan po kami ng pagkain. Salamat po sa pagkain.
Vincent Arboleda, UNTV News and Rescue, Philippines.
President Rodrigo Duterte may choose the next leader of the lower house of Congress on June 28, according to Masbate Congressman-elect Will Conco. Grace Casin reports why.
Davao City Congressman-elect Paulo Duterte hosted a meeting in Malacañang last night with President Rodrigo Duterte, Marinduque Representative Lord Alan Velasco, and other congressmen. Masbate Congressman-elect Will Conco, one of the neophyte congressmen invited to the dinner, said they talked about who will be the president's choice of the next House Speaker.
Sabi ni Presidente, hintayin lang namin June 28 para sa decision. May paiwatig siya na may in-endorse, pero syempre hindi niya rin sinasabi kung sino. So, siguro hintayin na lang talaga natin sa 28.
Co added Velasco had laid out his plans if he gets selected as the new House Speaker. In a statement, Velasco said the objective of the dinner was to foster camaraderie among the incoming members of the 18th Congress to work harmoniously and forward the legislative agenda. He also thanked President Duterte for joining the dinner on June 18. Congressman Cos said no bribery happened during the dinner in Malacañang. Also yesterday, Taguig Congressman-elect Alan Peter Cayetano invited some congressmen in Clark, Pampanga to support his speakership bid. Presidential spokesperson Secretary Salvador Panelo has earlier said that the chief executive will not intervene in the Congress in choosing the next leader of the lower house. Grace Casin, UNTV News and Rescue, House of Representatives.
The Comelec and Bank will not yet release the Duterte Youth Party list certificate of proclamation until the issue on Ronald Cardema's substitution issue gets resolved. Aiko Miguel will tell us why.
The Commission on Elections, or Comelec and Bank, cannot yet decide on the case of former National Youth Commission Chair Ronald Cardema. This as a new petition has been filed against the representative of the Duterte Youth Party list. On Monday, a petition was filed at Comelec by former Comelec Chairman Sixto Brillantes Jr. and election lawyer Romulo Macalintal to junk Cardema's substitution bid. This afternoon, the Comelec First Division resumed the hearing on the case.
Pangalawa na po ito at pirmado ng mga abogadong si Attorney Sixto Brillantes at si Attorney Romulo Macalintal. Dahil dito may hearing po ang First Division, maaaring makonsolidate o isasabay na ang pagdidesisyon sa mga kasong ito para mapadali naman po ang pagresolusyon.
Kaya lang namin pinail yun, yung pangalawa, kasi ang tingin namin mali yung disqualification case. It has to be denied due course. Pero kanina kinokorek na ni Commissioner Guanzon. It can also be treated as a denied due course ito. So okay na yun. Ngayon mako-consolidate na.
Comelec Commissioner Rowena Guanzon also said they cannot make the final decision unless hearings on the petition opposing Cardema's bid for a seat in Congress as a youth representative are not over. Guanzon and even Commissioner Louis Tito Guia have stated before that Cardema cannot assume a congressional seat under the Duterte Youth. First, because they lack documents when they submitted their Certificate of Nomination and Acceptance or CONA. Cardema is over 30 years old, so he is not qualified to belong to the youth sector of Congress. Under Republic Act 7941 or party list system, a youth representative should at least be 25 to 30 years old.
Ang Commission and Bank ay hindi muna mag-i-issue ng Certificate of Proclamation sa party list ng Duterte Youth dahil po sa pending na mga kaso ukol sa substitution ni Mr. Cardema tungkol po dun sa kanyang kwalifikasyon bilang nominee substitute ng Duterte Youth.
Youth Act Now Against Tyranny, Kabataan Party List, and other groups oppose Cardema's congressional bid.
Hindi kailanman ito tatanggap ng mga kabataan dahil ayaw nating babuyin nitong mga tuta at mga tagasunod ni Duterte ang ating party list system.
Cardema's camp has earlier stated that Duterte Youth represents not only the youth group but also the professionals, so Cardema can still sit as the first nominee of the Duterte Youth Party List. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue, Manila.
The number of Filipino families who consider themselves poor dropped this year, according to the latest Social Weather Stations or SWS survey. The SWS 2019 first quarter survey showed that a new record low of 38%, or an estimated 9.5 million families, consider themselves poor. This is 12 points below the 50%, or estimated 11.6 million families recorded in December of 2018, and 4 points below the previous record low of 42% in September 2016 and March 2018. Meanwhile, the number of families who consider themselves food poor also dropped with its new record low of 27%, or estimated 6.8 million families. This is 7 points below the 34%, or estimated 7.9 million recorded in December of 2018, and 2 points below the previous record low of 29%. On the self-rated poverty threshold. The survey also showed that the monthly budget that a poor household needs for home expenses in order not to consider themselves poor in general is 10,000 pesos. The March 2019 Social Weather Station survey was conducted from March 28 to 31, 2019 using face-to-face interviews of 1,440 adults nationwide. Meanwhile, Malacañang welcomes the record low self-rated poverty in the first quarter of the year. According to presidential spokesperson Salvador Panelo, the Duterte administration continues to break barriers. The Duterte administration targets to reduce poverty in the country from 21.6% to 14% in 2022. Members of investment firms in Tagum City submit their complaints to the police after failed promises. Janice Inhente will tell us why.
These investors in several investment schemes in Tagum City had hoped to double their money, but their hopes changed to worry after realizing there is no assurance of getting back their investments. June Lim is one of the investors in Titan 29 Marketing. He says his capital is more than 500,000 pesos. Now he is worried if the company would return his money now that its owner cannot be found.
Isa po ko sa nakabutang taon nang yawat po basin di ogwan o balag kapital ang mauli na siguro sa mga 600,000.
Aside from June Lim, other investors have reported and complained to the Tagum City Police Station after the failure of their expected payout.
Bali, niabot na og mga 30. So, dili gyud na ingon nga ako atanan niya. Bali ako alang nakapangalan kay ako may nagkuhan. Ang amo alam po doon ta, og wa man ni problema, mauli lang gud ang amo ang gipiin. Mao ra man ay among pangayo.
The Tagum City Police have recorded 15 complaints from investors against investment firms in the city.
Isa doon sa una, yung sabi ko nga, is isa na nagpromissory na balik sa kanila yung pera. Well, the next one is yung sinabi nyo kanina, isa lang din, marami nag-complain but only one talaga nag-prosper.
Authorities continue to monitoring other investment firms in the region that are still operating. Janice Inhente, UNTV, News and Rescue, Tagum City.
The PNP Internal Affairs Service conducts a motu proprio investigation against the policeman involved in the arrest of a journalist in Lagundingan Airport. Lea Ilagan will tell us why.
The apology of the cops who arrest Fidelina Margarita Valle in Lagundingan Airport in Misamis Oriental last June 9 is not enough. Philippine National Police Internal Affairs Service, or PNP-ES Inspector General Alfigar Triambolo says there is a failure of intelligence on the part of the arresting team or the Criminal Investigation and Detection Group or CIDG Zamboanga del Sur Provincial Field Unit, Regional Special Operations Group Police Regional Office 9, Aviation Security Group Region 10, and Lagundingan Municipal Police Station, so they arrested the wrong person. He adds they are conducting a motu proprio investigation because those policemen violated the journalist's human rights. Valle was at the Lagundingan Airport waiting her flight back to Davao City where she resides. They were supposed to arrest a certain Elsa Renton who allegedly uses the aliases Tina Maglaya and Fidelina Margarita Valle. The second alias is slightly similar to Margarita's full name, Fidelina Margarita Avellanosa Valle.
Ito ay nagkamali at ito naman ay inaamin nila, no? Nagkamali kaya pinakawalan nila din. So that is a clear admission doon silang pagkakamali. So ito ay violation ng human rights because it deprived of his right of locomotion or liberty.
Triambolo adds the incident could have been avoided if the arresting officer did their job properly and responsibly.
May mga parameter sa Constitution, no? Para maiwasan po yung ganyong pagkakamali na pati po yung mga description ng taong huliin, yung particular address, kompleto po yun, no? Ito ay isang negligence, no? Sa on their part na at least meron silang itong inosente na tao nito ay hindi naman fugitive, dapat ito ay isang kahiyaan ng isang tao na hinuhuli na wala namang kasalanan.
Triangulo explains they are still waiting for the statement of Valle, who was released on Sunday, to proceed to the pre-charge investigation. The pre-charge investigation will determine if the policemen are liable of grave misconduct because of arresting the wrong person, arbitrary detention, negligence in their work, and violation of human rights. Triangulo confirms that grave misconduct is punishable with dismissal from the service. Leia Ilagan, UNTV, News and Rescue, Camp Crame.
The Philippine Weather Agency will include the impact or effect of a storm surge when issuing a warning to the public. Ray Pelayo tells us why.
The world has seen how powerful and disastrous a storm surge can be on a community when Super Typhoon Yolanda devastated the country, particularly Visayas, in 2013. Yolanda left more than 6,000 deaths and billions of pesos worth of damages in properties and agriculture.
Because the people do not have a better understanding what would be the impact of storm surge, they were not able to evacuate their places.
Historical records show there are storm surge events that also left casualties and damages in eastern Visayas, with a Yolanda-like typhoon track. A 7.3-meter storm surge killed 7,000 residents in Hernani, while almost a meter of storm surge was also recorded in Tacloban in that event. Deaths were also recorded in 1912, 1984, and 1988 due to typhoons. And in 2011, Rojas Boulevard along the Manila Bay experienced almost a meter of storm surge due to Typhoon Pedring. DOST Undersecretary Renato Solidum said the storm surge will eventually be acceptable to the public like a tsunami. It is just necessary to create scenarios that will make the public imagine the impact of a storm surge. The official mentioned as an example the government's campaign in informing the public about the impact or effect of an earthquake like the big one.
So bawat barangay dapat may specific scenario na dapat paghahandaan. Aling mga panganib, gaano kalala ang problema. At ito ay kailangan ng tulong ng iba't ibang sangay ng gobyerno, lalong-lalo na sa local government level.
Pag-asa will issue a color-coded storm surge warning from the provincial to municipal levels when there is a strong tropical cyclone forecast to affect the country. A blue warning means that less than a meter of storm surge may arrive in the area. It is not necessary to evacuate, but the public must be aware especially of weather developments. The yellow warning denotes 1 to 2 meters of storm surge. The public should be prepared and stay away from the coast or beach. An orange warning is life-threatening and the public must be guided with the local authorities' evacuation plan because a 2 to 3 meter storm surge might inundate the area. A red warning will mean a mandatory evacuation because of a more than 3 meter storm surge projected to hit the area.
Ang storm surge parang tsunami din yan. Okay. Pag storm surge, may bagyo ka. So malakas na hangin ang unang mauna sa iyo kasi yung katawan ng bagyo mauna na sa mata. Tapos darating yung mataas na alon. So dapat nag-evacuate na yung tao kaagad before the arrival of the storm surge. Tapos siguraduhin mo na hindi rin malalandslide yung evacuation area mo.
Ray Pelayo, UNTV, News and Rescue, Quezon City.
People know that survival is impossible without water. But did you know that we don't just need water, but safe water? Monokson explains why.
Are you having trouble with your water supply again? Have you experienced taking a bath and then all of a sudden, no water flows out from the faucet? It's been a fact that people can't survive without water. But the reality is, we don't just need water, but safe water. Did you know that according to the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund or UNICEF, 2.2 billion people don't have access to safe water? There are countries that experience drought and do not have easy access to clean drinking water. Actually, we don't just need clean water. It must be safe water to drink. In third world countries, people need to fetch water from far places so they can have water to use. UNICEF says that 4.2 billion people don't have safely managed sanitation services, and 3.3 billion people lack basic hand washing facilities. Also, based on UNICEF records, there are 144 million people who still drink untreated surface water. One cause of the water problem is the negligence of people, throwing garbage anywhere. The result is the spread of diseases. Climate change is also a worldwide problem. Climate change is destroying, drying up, and contaminating water sources. UNICEF says that in year 2040, billions of people will not have access to safe water due to the cause of climate change. That is why we in the Philippines should be grateful that we still have safe water sources. Currently, there is a water shortage issue because of the receding water level in Angat Dam. We must conserve and be responsible in using water so as not to worsen the current water supply situation. Monhok Son, UNTV News and Rescue.
And to complete the most significant news for this day, Y News continues. Here are the top stories. An international relations specialist says it is premature to invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty on the Recto Bank incident. Meanwhile, various groups gathered today to cry for justice for the 22 fishermen affected in the maritime incident. Harleen Delgado will tell us why.
Invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty between the Philippines and the United States in the West Philippine Sea is premature, according to a security analyst. This was after Senator Panfilo Ping Lacson brought up the idea of invoking the treaty due to the sea ramming incident near Recto Bank to make China feel the balance of power in the West Philippine Sea. Professor Romel Banlawi of the Philippine Institute for Peace, Violence, and Terrorism Research says the treaty can be invoked only if the problem is military in nature.
Well, napaka-premature na ipasok sa usapin yung Mutual Defense Treaty kasi yung problema na nangyari sa Reed Bank ay hindi pa nag-develop into a military problem. I-assert mo lang yung Mutual Defense Treaty kung yung problema ay military na in nature. And it's also very counterproductive to even think of the Mutual Defense Treaty at this time. Kasi hindi naman siya military problem. It's a law enforcement problem, it's a diplomatic problem.
Meanwhile, various groups gathered along Elliptical Road in Quezon City on Wednesday afternoon to cry for justice for the 22 fishermen who were allegedly abandoned by the Chinese in the sea ramming incident near Recto Bank. They are also protesting the administration's supposed failure to assert the interest of the Filipino fishermen and the country's sovereign rights. Members from Bagong Alyansang Makabayan, Bayan Muna, Sandugo, League of Filipino Students, Anak Bayan, ACT Teachers, and Kadamay waved their banners as they encouraged motorists to blow their horns to show support. For former Bayan Muna Representative Neri Colmenares, President Duterte should abandon his wrong independent foreign policy.
Mali ang kanyang foreign policy theory na pag-igiit natin ng ating karapatan, gigirahin tayo ng China. Walang aral yan. He is ignorant on foreign policy. Kasi ang Vietnam at ang Taiwan halimbawa, bawat kibot ng China sa South China Sea, nilalabanan nila yan.
Meanwhile, Bayan Secretary General Renato Reyes says they wanted to spark outrage from the people by knowing the facts behind the issue.
Ang gusto natin dito ay mapanagot yung mga Chinese crew na naglubog nung sa barko ng mga Pilipinong mangingisda. Gusto natin magkaroon ng hustisya para sa ating mga kababayan at gusto natin matigil na yung pangangayupapa at pagyuko ng Philippine government doon sa mga dayuhan. Kahiya-hiya na po eh.
The groups ended their protest with the burning of Chinese flag to signify their flaming desire for genuine freedom and national sovereignty. Harleen Delgado, UNTV News and Rescue, Quezon City.
Meanwhile, the number of people fleeing war, persecution, and conflict exceeded 70 million globally last year, the highest number in the UN Refugee Agency's almost 70 years of operations. Mirasol Abogadil will tell us why.
The
Despite populist rhetoric in the West, the real refugee crisis is playing out in developing countries, which hosts most of the record 70.8 million displaced people who have fled war and persecution. The almost 70.8 million people forcibly displaced is 2.3 million more than the previous year, according to the United Nations Refugee Agency's annual Global Trends Report. The figure is also double the level recorded 20 years ago. The number averaged out to 37,000 new displacements every day.
Yeah, and it's not just in the United States, in Europe as well. Australia, it started earlier in Australia than in other places. This is the crisis of solidarity that I have mentioned. It is identifying refugees and migrants with the problem instead of people that are fleeing from a problem.
The figure is conservative as it does not include most of the 4 million Venezuelans who have fled abroad since 2015, it said. This is because Venezuelans do not need visas or to lodge asylum claims to stay in most host countries. If the outflow continues, a total of 5 million Venezuelans could have left by year-end. Filippo Grandi, UN High Commissioner for Refugees, urged for a political solution in the country.
Certainly, if the situation is not solved politically in Venezuela, with a political agreement, we will see a continuation of this exodus. I know that the government of Venezuela has complained that our figures are inflated. Well, these are the figures that we get from governments in the region.
Venezuelans arriving mainly in Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador formed the second biggest flow of newly displaced abroad last year, after Syrians fleeing to Turkey after 8 years of war, the agency said. U.S. President Donald Trump has made reducing illegal migration along the border with Mexico one of his signature policy pledges. Mirasol Abugadil, UNTV, News and Rescue.
And for the news abroad, U.S. President Donald Trump formally launched his 2020 re-election campaign by presenting himself as the same political insurgent who shook up the Washington establishment 4 years ago. Kath Dumaraos explains why.
At a packed rally at an arena in Orlando, Florida, U.S. President Donald Trump made clear he would run for re-election as an outsider, just as he did in 2016.
We're going to keep it better than ever before. And that is why tonight I stand before you to officially launch my campaign for a second term as President of the United States. Thank you.
During his roughly 80-minute speech, Trump revisited campaign themes from 4 years ago, decrying illegal immigration, the news media, and his 2016 Democratic opponent, Hillary Clinton.
Yes, we are doing things that few others have even tried to do. We are making progress like nobody would believe. Wait till you see some of the things that you're going to be hearing about over the next 2 months. We believe our country should be a sanctuary for law-abiding citizens, not for criminal aliens.
Trump said his Democratic challengers would radically change the United States and seek to legalize migrants coming across the southern border so they could vote and boost the Democratic political base. 24 Democrats are competing for their party's nomination to face off against Trump in the November 2020 election. Many of the top Democrats lead Trump in opinion polls in battleground states.
No matter what label they use, a vote for any Democrat in 2020 is a vote for the rise of radical socialism and the destruction of the American dream.
Trump entered the stage with his wife Melania, who said she was excited to be First Lady for 6 more years. Senior figures from the White House, including Vice President Mike Pence and outgoing Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, also spoke at the rally. Florida is a key battleground state and one that Mr. Trump narrowly won in 2016. Some supporters had been waiting since the early hours of Monday morning to see the president. A counter-demonstration against his appearance was also held nearby. Kat Dumaraos, UNTV News and Rescue.
Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has said she is fine after she was seen trembling as she greeted Ukraine's president on a boiling day in Berlin. Merkel, 64, was visibly struggling as she stood next to Volodymyr Zelensky while a military band played the two countries' anthems in the midday sun. The temperatures in the German capital were approaching 30 degrees Celsius at the time. Merkel said she was dehydrated and she has drunk at least 3 glasses of water and is doing very well now. Meanwhile, Zelensky, a comedian turned president, said that he would have come to the rescue if needed. A strong 6.7 magnitude earthquake rocked Japan Tuesday night, sparking a tsunami advisory and cutting power to thousands of residents. Meanwhile, Canada approved as expected a hotly contested proposal to expand the Western Canadian crude oil pipeline it bought last year. Jovic Burmas tells us why.
In Japan, at least 26 people were injured, including one seriously, after a magnitude 6.7 earthquake struck Japan's northwestern region late Tuesday, causing landslides and power outages in some areas. The quake hit Niigata Prefecture on Tuesday night, recording a maximum of upper 6 on the Japanese seismic intensity scale to 7. The Japan Meteorological Agency canceled the tsunami advisory around 2.5 hours after the quake. Thousands of households were left without power temporarily, but power supply recovered by Wednesday morning. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said his government would be on the maximum alert to prepare for possible rescue operations in the region and warned citizens to be vigilant for strong aftershocks. In Canada, Canada has approved the Trans Mountain Expansion project after a federal court sent it back for review last summer. His federal Liberals took the rare step last year of buying the pipeline for 4.5 billion Canadian dollars to help ensure the project's survival. Trudeau on Tuesday announced the new approval and said that all revenues the federal government earns from the project will fund a transition to a green economy.
You can't have a real economic plan, a real jobs plan in the 21st century, unless you have a real climate change plan. We want good middle-class jobs now and good middle-class jobs for our kids. To do that, we need to create wealth today so we can invest in the future.
Reaction to the announcement was swift, with environmental campaigners vowing the project will not go ahead without a fight. In the United Kingdom, Amnesty International urged Egyptian authorities on Tuesday to investigate the death of former Islamist President Mohamed Morsi, who died suddenly aged 67 after collapsing in court in Cairo during a trial. Magdalena Mughrabi, Deputy Director of the Middle East and Northern Africa for Amnesty International, said they are calling on the Egyptian authorities to conduct an independent and impartial investigation into his death. The human rights group called for an investigation into the medical care Morsi was receiving and for anyone found responsible for mistreatment to be held accountable. And in Hong Kong, pro-democracy groups in Hong Kong rejected Chief Executive Carrie Lam's public apology on Tuesday and demand she step down. Lam on Tuesday signaled the end of a controversial extradition bill that she promoted but then postponed after some of the most violent protests. She apologized for the turmoil but refused to say the bill would be withdrawn. Two groups, the Civil Human Rights Front, CHRF, and Pan-Democracy Camp, said this was not enough. Jovic Burmas, UNTV News and Rescue.
Team Ineos rider Geraint Thomas may not be able to join Tour de France. Meanwhile, Olympic 800 meters champion Caster Semenya accuses the global athletics governing body of using her as a human guinea pig. Vincent Arboleda will tell us why.
Tour de France champion Geraint Thomas crashed on the fourth stage of the Tour de Suisse on Tuesday and abandoned the race, his team said. The incident puts a question mark over his participation in the July 6 to 27 French race, the biggest in the cycling calendar. Ineos are already without four-time Tour de France champion Chris Froome for the 3-week race around the country after he suffered a heavy crash at the Criterium du Dauphiné. Thomas sat up after the crash and was moving both his arms. Meanwhile, Olympic 800 meters champion Castor Semenya has accused the global athletics governing body of using her as a human guinea pig as it emerged that the IAAF had sought to have her declared a biological male in proceedings before sport's highest court. The South African was reacting to the full 163-page judgment released by the Court of Arbitration for Sport on Tuesday, which rejected her appeal against rules that mean middle-distance female athletes with a high natural level of testosterone must take medication to reduce it. Semenya and Athletics South Africa are currently challenging the CAS ruling in the Swiss Federal Tribunal, with their submissions and those of the IAAF to be made by June 25. Until then, she is free to run in all events without taking medication. Testosterone increases muscle mass, strength, and hemoglobin, which affects endurance. Some competitors have said women with higher levels of the hormone have an unfair advantage. Vincent Arboleda, UNTV News and Rescue.
A Cuban artist finds his inspiration hundreds of feet under the sea among fishes and coral reefs. Nina Armilio will tell us why.
Some artists like to go on a countryside retreat to foster their creative process. For Cuba Sander Gonzalez, there is no better place to sketch than several meters below the surface of the sea, surrounded by iridescent Caribbean fish and fantastical coral forms. The 42-year-old is renowned at home and abroad for his predominantly black and white haunting images of imaginary cityscapes inspired by a trip to Europe and reflecting the aggressiveness of modern urban life. Then, 6 years ago, he went scuba diving in Cuba and found his inspiration in the complete opposite, the tranquility found below water, where all forms are natural and not man-made. All sounds are muffled and the light ripples softly. While Gonzalez had heard of a biologist painting underwater in Spain, he decided to experiment for himself until he found a way of sketching with charcoal or oil paints, which, unlike pastels or watercolor, would not dissolve. The Cuban learned to then soak the canvases for at least an hour and rinse them to get rid of the salt and any organic matter before hanging them out to dry.
This started as a hobby, as a passion. I never thought it would develop this way. It all started honestly as an experiment. I'm an artist. As a painter, as a creator, I think any medium is valid. Not everyone tries underwater.
To do so, he gets fully kitted out in scuba diving gear, including an oxygen tank and yellow flippers, and swims out 197 feet to his easel fixed in the seabed around 20 feet below the surface. With him, he carries his canvas and other equipment, like a spatula for the oil paints, weighed down with some lead to avoid it floating to the surface if he lets go. The artist said he does not plan beforehand, instead allowing inspiration to strike as he enters a meditative state in the crystalline water. But inevitably, his submarine work is more about nature than the cityscape series he continues to develop on land.
I really didn't expect to see somebody underwater painting a nice painting of a whale while I was diving. That actually was really kind of neat and something I haven't seen before.
Gonzalez, who makes a living selling work at his studio in Havana for a median price of $1,000 per canvas, exhibits some of his submarine work at the Punta Perdiz Dive Center. He is now hoping to get state permission to sell the work and develop the area as a center for underwater art. Nina Armilio, UNTV News and Rescue.
And those are the reasons behind the news this June 19, 2019. On behalf of Alex Baltazar and Angelo Castro III, I am William Theo, and before we close, we will recap with today's significant sound bites. Because we need to know, we will always ask why. Good evening.
Hindi man lang sinabi, nag-abiso kung mawawalan o hindi. Kaya nagulat na lang kami nung bandang hapon na wala ng tubig, di man lang kami nakapag-ipon.
Not from a local source na hindi ko na tinanong kung ano yung basis, but ang sinasabi doon is it was a test of how far back we can go. Kasi kung alam nilang urong tayo ng urong, sulong sila ng sulong.
Siguro po aksidente o kasi yung napasabi siguro kasama ko sinadya gawa ng nung nadisgrasya na kami, nalubog na kami, nag-ano pa yung barko, bumalik ng sa naglubugan namin, nilawan. Tapos pagka nakita kaming lubog na kami, biniglang pinatay lahat ng ilaw nila at tumakbo na sila.
We're going to keep it better than ever before. And that is why tonight I stand before you to officially launch my campaign for a second term as President of the United States.